Policy and Audit Subcommittee meeting for October 28th. We'll call this meeting to order, and could our recording secretary do a roll call?
Yes. Chair Schwethelm.
Here.
Member Rogers.
We may have lost him.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
Thank you. Member Sawyer.
Here.
All right. Let the order reflect all subcommittee members are present.
Okay, so for those in attendance, I have some housekeeping things to read. Remind subcommittee members, keep your audio on mute unless you are speaking. Staff will remain muted until needing to speak. And then as members of the public join the meeting, you'll be participating as an attendee. Your microphone and camera will be muted. Only today's panelists will be viewed during the meeting. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy concerns, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number to resident in the last 4 digits of your phone number. Madam Recording Secretary, could you explain how public comments will be heard at today's meeting?
Yes. At each item, the item is presented. The chair will ask for subcommittee member comments and then open it up for public comment. The host in Zoom will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the chair has called for public comment, the chair will announce for the public to raise their hand if they wish to speak on the specific agenda item. If you are calling in to listen into the meeting audibly, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. The host will then call on the public who have raised their hands. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and a timer will appear on the screen for the subcommittee members and public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will read emails submitted. If you provide a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted an email, your email comment will not be read during the meeting. Additionally, there is 1 public comment period on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters, which is item 2. This is the time when any person may address the subcommittee on the matters not listed on the agenda.
Great, thank you for that. So we are now taking public comments on item 2, non-agenda matters. This is a time when any person may address the subcommittee on matters not listed on this agenda. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Would our host please facilitate item 2, public comment on this agenda?
A countdown timer will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of the countdown. At this time, I am seeing no raised hands, and there was no email public comment.
All right, thank you. On to item 3, approval of minutes. Chris and John, did you get a chance to look at the minutes from our September 10th meeting? And if so, any additions, corrections, deletions?
I found no additions, corrections, or deletions.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
It wasn't a challenge, John, just checking in. So. Okay, so we'll accept those as submitted.
It's like when he has to repeat his oath of office, right?
God, that's 3 words at a time max, just to know, just to let you know.
All right, on to item 4. Item 4.1. Mr. Alton, I think you're introducing this item.
I am. Thank you very much, Chairman Schwethelm and members of the subcommittee. So what we are going to talk about today are potential revenue options for the general fund. The purpose of this item is really to kick off a discussion of revenue items. When we had the management partner presentation in September, they had called out a few of them. And so we have begun kind of putting together things that we possibly could do in order to become less dependent on sales tax. to really kind of diversify our revenue base that we have, and really bring things into kind of the modern era in terms of our revenue. So next slide, please. So just by way of background, the two major revenue sources that the general fund has are sales taxes and property taxes. They make up, out of our total general fund revenue base, they are about, what, $85 million and make up about 52% of general fund revenue. So, like I said before, we're looking for ways to become less dependent on sales tax. Property tax stays reasonably stable. It's sales tax which becomes more volatile, especially during recessionary periods like we're in right now. One of the things, well, management partners mentioned a number of different options that may be available to us, one of which was to increase the cap on business tax. I'll just mention that kind of off the cuff here, that our current rate for that was set back in 1990. The cap is at $3,000. If increased by inflation, that cap would be around $6,700 now. So clearly, this is something that is has not grown with inflation over time. Our estimates are that if we bumped it up to the cap to $5,000, it could be an extra $670,000 to the general fund, and then 8,000 would be maybe 1.3 million, right around that. Those were figures that were brought up by management partners having looked at our business tax consultant. Next slide, please. So the next item is transient occupancy tax. So currently our combined rate that hotel customers will pay is 14%, which is made up of 9% of a TOT rate, 3% Santa Rosa Tourism BIA, and then the Sonoma County BIA, which is 2%. So of all those, only the TOT rate of 9% actually goes into the general fund as revenue. The Sonoma County BIA is a direct pass through to the county. We just literally just move it right through. Santa Rosa Tourism is split between our Economic Development Fund in the city, and then it goes to the Tourism Bureau, the remainder of it. So because it is TOT is a general fund revenue, it just requires a simple majority vote from the public, so it requires a simple majority vote. We'll just leave it at that. Next slide, please. So when we've looked at this before, one of the issues that we have is that at 9%, our TOT is is the lowest in the county. However, when you combine it with our BIAs, which you really do need to do, it comes up to 14%, which then puts us just below Healdsburg as being higher in the county, equal to Windsor and Rohnert Park. So I believe Healdsburg is still at, I want to say they're still at 16% all in. So one of the things that we could do is, and I've talked about this a little bit with Raisa. Obviously, there would be more discussion, but if you increased your TOT by swapping out one of the BIAs, that would be a way where you could keep your rate the same, but still generate more money into the general fund. We calculate a percent increase on TOT to be about $500,000, maybe a little bit less, but about 500,000. So that's just an option. We could look to do different combinations with that. My goal would be to find a way to increase the general funds portion of TOT coming in, as that gives us the greatest flexibility within to use as revenue. Next slide, please. So another item that we could look at is utility users tax. There's currently a 5% tax that are on utility services, which includes telecommunications, gas, electricity, and video services. So for each one of those utilities, it's a 5% tax. So we've the tax is capped at $1,000, which basically means that most residents fall underneath that cap, especially, well, they fall underneath it for a lot of these things. And we do have a way for larger users to prepay if they know they're going to go over the cap. They just prepay, and then they don't have to worry about doing the reconciliations and all that. Now, our telecommunications part of the ordinance is very outdated. In 2014, we brought this to the council to look at modernizing it to be able to include mobile devices. So right now, the only telephone service that is charged UUT are landlines. And so what we would like to do, what I think we need to do, and unfortunately we couldn't do it earlier when there was more of a push at the state level to have mobile phones within UUT, is to be able to modernize that. The problem that we've had in the past of doing the switch out or not even a switch, just adding the mobile devices in with UUT, is that it is it's complicated to explain in a very concise way to the voters. I think it's been up twice, and both times it failed. I know recently in 2014 it failed, and I believe the other time was it was before I came to the city, so it was sometime in the 90s. It got labeled as a fax tax or something to that effect. So the point to this is that there is a way that we could increase our revenue base by about 1.2 million without raising rates at all, just by increasing the base on it. And it would make things more equitable to the folks that pay UUT, because as I said, right now, anyone that uses a mobile phone doesn't pay UUT on that service, but anyone that still has a landline does. So myself, I don't have a landline, I don't pay UUT. With that, I think we'll move forward to the next one. Sorry about that, I didn't mean to do that. Internal editorial. Next slide, please. All right, and this is another one that's come up a little bit, the parcel tax. So parcel taxes can be used for general services or specific projects. However, regardless of how you use it, because it is tied to property, it does require a 2/3 vote from the public. The parcel tax would be something that would be a flat rate. So it wouldn't be based on valuation. It would just be just a flat rate, and some properties could be exempted from this. Based on my research, I had that. I need to dive a little bit deeper into it. I think it's for like government properties and things like that typically aren't taxed anyway. Median parcel tax in California is $60 per parcel. So just a quick back of the envelope calculation on that, if we have about 54,000 parcels in Santa Rosa, so if you did a flat parcel tax at $60, the annual revenue generated would be approximately 3.2 million. So next slide. And cannabis tax. So this is a little, I don't have a very good estimate on where our rates could increase, but I do want to bring it up. It was brought up by management partners, and I do think it's something that that we could take a look at. Our current rate on, we have 5 types of operation that are taxed. So cultivator is taxed at 2%, or actually that should be $5 per square foot. Sorry about that. Manufacturer is 1%. Distributor is, we're currently not taxing them. Adult dispensary is at 3%, and we're not taxing medical dispensary. And all of those could go up to 8%. That's the range in our ordinance. Now, next slide, please. So I bring this up because what we are starting to see is that cannabis revenue is starting to get to where we were thinking that it might be. If you recall, when we very first started estimating cannabis tax revenue, we wildly overestimated. And now we're getting to a part where we're getting more businesses that are getting set up, that have gone through their process. They're getting established, and we're seeing an increase of revenue coming in. So from fiscal year 19, our total revenue coming in was 1.4 million. This past year, it was 1.9. So that's about a 34% increase in total revenue. Dispensaries and manufacturers are the ones that do generate the most revenue. I will say that the revenue that came in during the fourth quarter of 2020 was higher than any quarter. So at least for that quarter, it was COVID proof. And maybe it was a sign of being shut in your homes. I don't know. Unfortunately, though, we do have a small sample size, and estimating this revenue in the past has been difficult. Clearly, it would go up. I don't think that it would. I think that the industry is strong enough to sustain that. Now, that's more anecdotal, but I have seen other cities that have a rather robust cannabis environment, and where you would think that oversaturation or anything like that would have an effect, and it doesn't appear to. I was just in Bend, Oregon, and so I witnessed that for myself. They were like Starbucks; they were everywhere. And looking from the local Bend newspapers, they seem to be generating a lot of revenue for that city. Now they're set up a little bit differently than us, but just from we'd need to look at it a little bit closer. But it is something that seems like it would be willing or a good thing to look at going forward. And I think that's the last slide here. Is it next slide? Yeah, that was the last one. So there is one thing I did neglect to mention when talking about TOT. And just to give you kind of an update on that, because I know this is something that's been in front of some council members. I've sent some information out. So we have started the process of getting a firm in to do discovery on short-term rentals. They are those that register with the city are charged TOT. The problem is that it's kind of a voluntary thing. People that know they need to do it will come in and do it. They do the right thing. Others, either they don't know they're supposed to do it, or they just they try to go without registering, so they don't. So there are firms that specialize in doing this type of discovery that would provide us with a baseline of how many short-term rentals. Now it's going to vary as homes go on and off that particular market, but it would give us a baseline of where we could go, or what we think that we generally have. And then the next step would be introducing some sort of an ordinance that would that could work with the different platforms to ensure that people register. I was on a League of California Cities webinar last week where Palm Springs was featured, and while there was a representative from Expedia and they were speaking more of Expedia's way to do it, the way I understand Palm Springs program is that they work with the various platforms, and those platforms will not book for a company that does not have, or a home that does not have a city registered as TOT. So that's the way that they pull them in to be regulated. The different platforms work with the city, they share that information, and then the new short-term rentals come online. The platforms look for the city license, and if it's not there, then they refuse the booking. So those are things that we can look at. Clearly, just picking up those rentals that we're not getting would increase TOT as well. Right now, we have about 200 short-term rentals that we know of that are registered with the city. We think that there are a lot more out there. So hopefully we will have a company under contract by the end of the calendar year so we can start working on that and establish that baseline. I think in some closing remarks before before we go to before we can go on to questions, is that I think if you look at all of these, they're not they don't do a lot of revenue on themselves, right? You're not going to find a single thing that's going to replace $9 to $10 million a year for a 1/4-cent sales tax. I just don't think that that's out there. But what you can do is take a number of these things, bringing our codes up to current, and capturing more where we can, and including a larger base for some of our taxes. It would allow us to be able to provide some more of that diversity, so that maybe you don't replace a complete tax, but you do augment it quite a bit, and that's a way to help build some more long-term sustainability in there, especially things like UUT. I mean, having a modernized UUT allows you to be flexible with technology moving forward. Right now, we're stuck in 1970s technology. I have the same thing is there with TOT and with all those. A lot of those things are things that you could build in and count on for years going forward, which is why I think we need to start talking about it now as we start building future budgets. None of these things can happen overnight. They're all they all require votes. So we have to pick when they're actually going to go on a ballot, and we need to be able to build good educational campaigns that we, quite frankly, haven't done in the past with some of these. So we want to learn from those mistakes and go forward. But I think that if we can, through this committee, what I'm hoping for is to start beginning this dialogue on where the committee and ultimately the council wants to go with some of these revenues, and how we build up that base to try to make increasing them or expanding them successful. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Alan. If you could just clarify for me the process. So we're here today and the three of us will give you some feedback. But given what you just said about having an outside firm take a look at the short-term rentals,
Yeah.
I think that'd be a data point that I, as one member of this subcommittee, are interested in. I'm guessing the rest of the council and my other colleagues may want that. When would that information be available for us?
As soon as I can get them under contract, we can start the discovery work. I would imagine if I can get them under by the end of the calendar year, I would think that we would be able to have something in another month or two after that. So I think we would be looking at that. And in terms of process in general, this is a kickoff point, right? We got a bunch of information in September. We've been dealing pretty hot and heavy with the PG&E stuff and trying to get that information. We know that the next thing we need to do is look at revenues, and then we need to look at expenditures. And all of this is in the goal of building our budgets going forward. So really, I don't know that there's that many deliverables from this. Is to begin the conversation. If you have directions on which way you would want to go, obviously the short-term rental discovery seems to be one of them. Those are things that we can kind of point ourselves to. You'll also notice what I didn't talk about in here are fees. Planning and Economic Development has fees. There are master citywide fee studies that were brought up in the report. I think that those are things that need to happen, but they're kind of more internal things that we try to move forward within our individual portfolios. So what I really wanted to focus this time, though, is just on those things that require votes and that would go that way. So that's how I broke it up.
Okay, and I know when we had the management partners discussion about our budget, there's 20 different options. Some of them are here today. I know council, all 7 of us gave feedback about what areas they're interested in. Will we be reviewing that in that same format at some point, including what we discuss here on the subcommittee?
Yes, I think we would definitely want to do that. I know we're coming back at mid-year to talk budget. I haven't yet reached out to management partners on that one, but obviously I think that that's something that we would want to refresh our long range financial forecasts again, especially before going into budget. And so those are all those things where we can provide progress reports as we go forward.
Yeah. And obviously Tuesday is somewhat of a significant day for the budget of the city of Santa Rosa.
Yes, it is. I chose not to mention those.
Got to be real. Okay, so Chris and John, questions. John, you have one?
I do. Thanks, Mayor. I'll do a question. I have one question right now. On the business tax cap, it has been a long time since that was dealt with. Can that be phased? I know that the cap is, most people don't hit that cap. These are, it's pretty large institutions will do that, and my assumption is they have the ability to handle a fairly large increase, but not. Well, I'm guessing because I don't have a list in front of me. I would think that not all of those businesses that hit the cap could perhaps easily handle a $5,000 increase, moving to $8,000 as a cap.
Well, I think we can look at this, Councilmember Sawyer, from the perspective of, it hasn't been modernized since the 90s. Additionally, it is out of alignment with a lot of other businesses, and you can make an argument that the bigger businesses are getting a very reduced rate from the city of Santa Rosa. So we could look at this. I think one of the things we're trying to understand is where we should put our priority efforts on these particular items. Is there a preference from the subcommittee? We should probably get more detailed information, but again, with limited bandwidth for the staff, is there a priority way that you want us to attack this particular set of options.
Okay.
And again, I think that's a perfectly legitimate question that we could look at in terms of not just scope and scale, but what's the return, what's the impact. You can make an argument on that front, the one you're talking about, the business tax, is that if you want us to look at it from a perspective of phasing it in, really cushioning small business, especially during this particular time from acceleration, we could look at a variety of options if there's any specific, or if it's not the top priority, you'd rather have spend time looking at the TOT and the BIA issues. We're trying to get a sense of where the subcommittee wants us to spend some initial energy, and so that we can bring you back a fuller picture of what that particular set of endeavors and opportunities holds for us, right? So it's about managing our time and figuring out where the priority for this particular subcommittee lies. So that would be really helpful to get some input on which of these things are the top issues that you want us to tackle. We'll do our best to bring back a fuller, complete and a more complete picture. But that's an example of a great question and how we can figure out how to answer that question, Councilmember Sawyer.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I think that's the only question that I had. I'll save my comments for that period.
And the other thing I just wanted to point out, that on the TOT side, one of the issues that's come up is not just how do we deal with the short-term rentals, but there may be some long-term ways for us to manage relationship with those short-term rentals. Alan mentioned, one of the things is you bring these groups together and you help monitoring it. What Palm Springs was able to do was also get an ordinance in place that was really clearly communicated that if you're a repeat violator, you lose your license to operate, right? So it's not just a revenue mechanism, it's an enforcement mechanism that allows people opportunity to do some of these short-term rentals, but also says if you don't abide by the rules of the program, you can lose your ability to be a provider of a short-term rental. So we're balancing both the opportunity, the short-term rental and the revenue stream, but also the question about enforcement and eligibility of the property. If you don't, again, Palm Springs is very straightforward. If you get complaints about your property, you're going to lose your ability to provide this. You lose the ability to get this revenue stream through this.
It's a quality of life issue and peaceful enjoyment of people's homes. So I love that the Palm Springs program's looking really good.
Well, and again, what they did is they had a very good process to get there. It was a longer process. It was community involvement process, but there is opportunity there. And so we're looking at that. We have a group looking at that, but I think what we want to know is where do you want the staff to devote its resources on these particular options? Is there a particular order, or are there particular questions that you need further analysis here?
John, you're good? Okay. Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start with the TOT as well. I'm going to try to put this delicately. It is ridiculous that we have to bring in a company to try to make sure that people are paying the taxes that they should have. And so suggest that we continue to work with our state partners to get state legislation that either requires somebody who, an operator, call it Airbnb, call it VRBO, whatever it is, that it requires them to have a business license number to operate in a city that requires that for their long-term rentals. Or what would be even more ideal is that they themselves have to collect the tax and remit it to the city. The fact that we're having to use the public's resources to chase down this tax, to me, is not holding those companies accountable to what we should be doing. So I'd be in favor of us working with our state partners to try to get something changed so that we get access to the dollars that we're owed without having to spend money to bring in a company to get it. So that's my side there. I'm all in favor of that. Let's do that. My first question with TOT, you mentioned the potential shift of up to, it looks like 2% for that $1 million of revenue. So that would require a vote of the public, even though it doesn't change the amount. I guess I should ask it this way. Was it a vote of the public that determined that 2% would go to the BIA, or was it a council ordinance that could be changed to shift that 2% up to that 2% without a vote of the public?
I believe the BIAs, both of them were things that were entered into via council. However, because you would be going from 9% to say 11% of a TOT rate, that's going to require the vote. So that's how it is. You're changing a rate. The total effective rate is the same, but what you're doing is you're actually changing the rate that people voted on, which is the TOT.
Well, okay. I might need a little bit more information on this section then, because from the perspective of the public, they're paying the 11%, not the 9%.
Right. But the tax, the actual tax, which is what we're dealing with, that's the 9%.
So who authorized the other 2%?
I will, yeah, I'll get an opinion on that. I'll provide that.
So one of the things that's happened, which I think we could be more full in our explanation, is remember, there are two communities that actually do not participate in the countywide BIA, right? Those are, Alan, it's Healdsburg and
Sonoma.
Sonoma, right? So the question is here, is this something we could work on this and bring back a fuller report on this particular item with either two ways to explore it, right? One is looking at the and we need to talk to the Sonoma County Tourism Board. We want them to come and make their case as to why you changes. But I think there's what we're trying to state is that there's a way to approach this which would essentially remove the city from as much participation in the countywide effort. We could approach it is that we would get a vote of the public to increase our rate, and we could effectively not increase the overall rate. Right now, so there's multiple questions. We would want to open a conversation with our colleagues at the county, give them an opportunity to discuss what they feel the value is of the work they do and bring that back to the subcommittee. But at the same time, you could approach the voters about increasing your TOT rate, and subsequently that money would come to the city in whole. We wouldn't want to give you a partial picture on that front, Councilmember Rogers, but it's a complicated, that's why there is a lot of work here. We need to fully get you the information that you would need to make a recommendation to your colleagues. It's complicated work, which would require a vote at some point. But effectively, if you wanted us to pursue that, we could bring you back a report that looked at the plus and minuses of this, what the impacts would be. But the part of the reason we're asking this question is there's two communities that don't participate in the countywide BIA, and they keep all of the TOT for themselves. Now, that doesn't mean that's how they're investing their TOT. That's a secondary question. But Healdsburg and Sonoma do not participate in the countywide measure, and currently we do. So if you want us to look at that, happy to do it, but you see where it's a complicated conversation and would require a decent amount of staff time.
Yeah, no, I understand. And then for the Santa Rosa Tourism BIA, the 3%, is that one that if the council so chooses to do, could shift it around based on ordinance without going back to the public?
Alan, I don't know if would that be shiftable based on ordinance, or do we need to get a fuller opinion?
Let's be safe and get the fuller opinion on that one. I have a feeling I know the answer, but I don't want to steer you the wrong way with that.
Okay, understood.
So I guess the basic question there, council member, would be, are you interested in looking at this with the idea of keeping the cap and we could bring you back options to look at this. This is what you could do underneath that cap. I would, we're having a hard time making an argument to extend the amount, but if there's a desire to look at what we could do differently to bring more of that revenue directly to the city, and these are the trade-offs you would have to look at, we'd be happy to have that conversation with our colleagues.
I'm looking for options, and I'd need to, before I made any type of a recommendation, I'd need to better understand what all we were funding with the Santa Rosa Tourism BIA. I know a lot of it goes into the economic development, but for example, if we knew that park maintenance was being cut because we were having general fund issues, I might be interested in redirecting some of those funds into park maintenance for quality of life issues, right? But I need to better understand that to be able to have that conversation. I think overall, what would be most helpful for me, and I think regardless of the direction that the council went on this, what would be helpful for us for messaging to the public is to also have sort of a comparison of where we sit relative to other cities, and especially comparable cities in our surrounding cities. So, for example, understanding that TOT, that we're right in line when you consider the BIA is right in line with Windsor and Roanoke Park, that makes a lot of sense. But when you start to hear about the discrepancies that we have in our UUT with other cities on the modernization, on the cap issue, I think having that data to have a more informed conversation really will help us in the long term to make a smart decision, and then also to sell that decision. So I'm kind of just like looking for a chart, right? And picking out which cities we want to be compared to, or which cities we believe we should be compared to. I'm in favor of us doing a little bit more research on this. I'm happy for us to continue those conversations around them. Alan, you did make a comment that I thought was interesting. In general, I have not been supportive of raising the cannabis tax. I know that the council has not as well, because we're seeing businesses trying to get established. We are hearing a lot of stories of the haves and the have-nots within the cannabis industry. The people who are established are starting to do better, but it's still very challenging for businesses that have gotten their permits and gone through this long process to be approved in Santa Rosa, come out on the other side and they don't have the capital that they need to actually open their doors and get their business models in place. So you said that we are reaching a point, or we are at a point where cannabis businesses can actually shoulder that increase. And I'm wondering what the metric is that we're using. Is it just strictly based on the amount that's coming in is increasing, or is it you guys are seeing data where people who have been approved to operate are opening their doors? I'm wondering what metric we're using there.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. So one, it is revenue starting to hit the areas where we thought it was back when we first started this whole thing and figured out how many permits were being issued and along those lines. And we developed a revenue amount with that. And then we saw a whole bunch of flux, and we started out very low in revenue. And then it's steadily grown year by year, each year and almost quarter by quarter. I've also seen the number of permits actually go down, but seem to kind of stabilize. So I think it's between those two things where it just seems like the mark, and again, it's a small sample size, so I could be wrong on this, but just based on looking at it on paper, it looks like what we're starting to see is the foundation of the cannabis businesses starting to establish, and the revenue starting to get to a point where it's a more stable revenue coming into the city. So obviously we could let that go another year or so, and to watch that materialize with a larger sample size, that makes sense. But I would be remiss in not putting that out there to say this is an area where you could generate revenue, and you absolutely have the tool to do it. And it seems like that industry can support it. That's just where where I'm coming from with that. And I can absolutely give you, find more metrics on that, even if it proves me wrong.
Yeah.
But that's where we are.
No, I appreciate that. My sense is that we're not ready. I don't think we're ready to go there yet. This is still an emerging industry. And I'm hearing a lot of concern from folks still about getting operational. And my biggest concern is that there's a broader impact to our community if people slip back into the black market. What we've really been trying to do is try to establish a way for people to move forward with legal compliance. And I'd like us to continue to do that for the foreseeable future. I don't think I'll get there today on the cannabis taxes. And then there's a last thing, and I was curious. There isn't. There's one other type of tax revenue that I was kind of expecting to hear, and I'm trying to remember the actual technical term for it, but it's basically goods and services on the items. So, like for example,
Freezing up on us, Councilor. So
Yeah.
We're losing.
Could you repeat that?
All right, is that better?
yeah, we
Not
lost
yet.
Yeah, I actually realized everybody was frozen on my end, and I thought that meant I was frozen. So, yeah. So Alan, what I was saying, I couldn't remember the technical term, but it's a tax on essentially luxury goods and items, like for example, cars, right? That's a specific. You probably know the term, but that seemed like that was also an option for us to consider about what the options around that.
You mean a sin tax? Or
Yeah, there you
Kind
go.
of.
Yeah.
That's not the technical term, though, I'm sure.
a...
I think the Petaluma Auto Mall might really appreciate that tax.
Okay. I can look into
Yeah.
it.
And I'm just curious what the options are within it. I'm not trying to call out auto sales, John, but I do know that is an option if we're looking at all options.
Well, that was we can look at that. That wasn't part of the options that was brought forward in mid-September, but we can do a little deeper dive and see what the possibilities exist on that front, Council Member. Absolutely.
And then Alan, last question, I swear. You've got the parcel tax option that's in here. I'm curious, is there a way to structure a parcel tax so that it only lands on second homes? So that, say somebody owns multiple homes in the community, their primary residence doesn't have the parcel tax that gets levied on it, but if they are going to rent out that unit, whether it's a VRBO or whatever have you, could you structure the parcel tax in that way?
We can ask that question. That I do not believe we've done that type of analysis, but that's helpful. If that's where you want us to devote our resources, we would absolutely look at options around types of properties and how and whether there's any flexibility on assessment. Okay.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
And now my colleagues have asked most of my question. My question for you, Mr. City Manager, is I know this is can be a heavy lift. How does this fit within the priorities established by council? And I think we have our next goal setting in February. So would we need to bump these conversations? And I know we have financial stability is one of our current council goals, but how does that all work in?
So I think, again, we're trying to give you as much options as you get into the next budget season as possible. I mean, as you saw in the presentation, to stabilize the organization will take there's a lot dependent on what happens on Tuesday. And then there's additionally some requests, and it's not a cheap request to stabilize the organization, of PG and settlement funds to help stabilize. Anything we can do to explore other revenue options creates more opportunity for the council to think about that. In any way we get more diversified, as has been pointed out repeatedly, in our revenue streams, the more we're able to withstand the push and pulls of the issues. The challenge is that as you look at the dollars associated with each of these, there's no, to be honest, there's nothing, as Alan mentioned, that replaces a quarter. The reason that you find quarter-cent sales tax measures on the ballot frequently is you're talking about putting together a combination of revenue to assist you to achieve what can frequently be achieved in an easier way. I'll say it, through a ballot question that's about quarter-cent or more on the revenue. So the quicker we get answers to these questions and take on the challenge, the more flexibility the council will have, and the quicker we can get to educational conversations with the community about the needs around these. We're looking for prioritization so we can bring you back as much information. It's not an easy lift. But it's going to require some outside expertise and some community conversations. Even today we received a letter, I think, from our partners over at Sonoma County Tourism, thinking that a decision was going to be made today about where we're going. This is the start of a conversation and a beginning of prioritization so that we can bring you back that information in for goal setting and then in for budget.
Okay, that's helpful. I don't have any other questions. John and Chris, do you have any more questions? I know we'll have comments after we hear public comments.
Nope.
So we're now taking public comment on item 4.1, revenue options. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Would our Zoom host facilitate this portion of the public comment?
A countdown timer has appeared for your convenience of the speaker and viewers. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of the countdown. I see one hand raised. Kelly, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself for public record.
Good afternoon. This is Kelly Bass-Seibel with Sonoma County Tourism. Appreciate the robust conversation and the partnership. And Mr. McGlynn, welcome sitting down and talking a little bit more about how we're structured and funded. Did want to make a clarification, just I know on the PowerPoint slide, it talked about 100% of the funding going to the county, and did want to make the differentiation that the BIA with Sonoma County Tourism is a self-assessment by the lodging properties that have a revenue that's greater than $350,000 annually. It's remitted to Sonoma County Tourism, not to the county, and we're a private nonprofit comprised of lodging partners. With that, just want to be very clear that we base everything that we do on research and data, and obviously during the pandemic, we've pivoted our marketing focus on the drive and direct flight market. And going back to kind of what the ROI is, the data shows that for every dollar that we spend, Sonoma County Tourism spends on consumer marketing, $166 is generated in visitor spending and $7 is returned in county tax revenue across jurisdictions. In 2019, tourism marketing in Sonoma County resulted in $2.23 billion in annual revenue for businesses across the county. And without travel generated tax revenues, each Sonoma County household would have to pay an average of $1,000 more in taxes each year to maintain the same level of public services that is currently provided. So I also know that there was a comment about the cities that don't participate in the countywide BIA. And while we do market Sonoma County as a whole, there are benefits that those two jurisdictions do not receive. Through our marketing, we also recognize that individual cities, towns, and regions have differing needs and appeals, and marketing activity that mention specific cities or businesses are tracked to ensure that we're representing the entire region. Just at the beginning of 2020, we provided the Economic Development Department with a detailed inventory of Santa Rosa specific marketing activities in 2019. And we're happy to and welcome the opportunity to provide an updated inventory that also goes through what we've done through the first half of 2020 and any further conversations that you may wish to have on kind of the activities that are happening and that we're doing to bolster the economy in both Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. At this time, I see no other hands raised. And there were no public comment received via email.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, Alan, then I'll just make the assumption, or we'll just give you the feedback, each of us, about the presentation and some of the priorities that we might have at this point. Does that work for you? Mr. Sawyer?
Thank you, Mayor. I just was going to request if I could go first. I have kind of a hard, it's going to be a little past 5, but a bit of a hard stop at 5 o'clock. If you don't mind me going first.
As long as Mr. Rogers is okay. Ooh, double thumbs up.
All right.
Go
Thanks,
ahead,
Chris. Appreciate it. I will be brief. So part of my comments have to do with the appetite of our community, and each of these increases
Did he just freeze on you guys?
He really did have a
Yes,
hard
he did.
stop.
I was just going to say that.
John? Sean, you're on mute.
We can follow up with Mr. Sawyer if he can't return, so we can get his input.
It's kind of scary the way he's frozen there, but
I think Alan's about to do some puppeteering here. I want to do this.
Chris, why don't you go on, and if,
Yeah, it looks like we lost him.
and he's
There he
back.
is.
Okay, I'll go fast. I think, was I talking about appetite of the taxpayers? Or did you hear anything at all? So anyway.
We heard that.
All right. I really do like couching this in the way of modernization, because there are a number of these that really need to be modernized, and it's going to take some conversation with staff, of course. The business tax cap, I had mentioned that. I do like the idea of phasing. I think given our current financial situation in our city, I think phasing is wherever we can, not only tends to soften the blow, but also gives us an opportunity to give them some advance warning that by this date this is happening, and so on and so on, so that they can actually plan. So in the TOT, clearly I was on the council when we voted this in. There was a great deal of conversation about how to split the funds, and I think that it's probably time to have that conversation again with what's going on in the tourism business or industry. This would be a good time to articulate the benefits of the county, of paying into the county, and also the benefits of keeping the money inside of Santa Rosa, regardless of the process that we would have to go through. I think it's a conversation well worth having, and I know the rest of the council, if I'm not mistaken, is definitely looking for that conversation as well, because of the dollars we're talking about. UUT, modernization of the UUT, I think would be again something that people could understand and realize that in some cases they're not paying more, they're just paying what they used to pay when they had a landline. I have 2 landlines and cell, and I know most people don't have that, but it's 5%. I think it's recapturing what we're not getting anymore from the landlines, I think would be an important conversation. Parcel tax, I look at my own taxes. We're pushing $1,000 on bonds. Bonds alone, and the special taxes are really pushing it up there. But I don't see for Santa Rosa, there's nothing that really speaks about quality of life or city services. And I think so that would be something I would like to have a conversation about as well, is actually having a line item in our property tax that speaks to city services. Is that would that be an easy sell? Probably not. I really like Chris's idea about second home concepts, because the rental home, the one rental home that we have, I'm paying more than my home, but that's a business, and I could see ourselves being able to have a conversation around second homes, and avoiding the increase in the taxes for people's primary residence. Cannabis tax, I agree with Chris. I think that yes, in time, and that might be sooner than later of increasing the tax, but it would give, I think there are some that are struggling, and it seems a little bit premature even though we gave ourselves a range, we told them what range we were considering when we first put together and put through our ordinance. It would be nice not to get to that cap quite as quickly as maybe we would like to, but I am concerned about the black market, and that was our goal, is to mitigate that reality. So I would be really careful about a cannabis tax. So I think I've covered them. I know it's not specific recommendations. It's like I need more information on everything, and that's not necessarily great for staff, because I know it takes a lot of work to give us more details. But I think in this financial climate, and also being able to give us a laundry list and saying, pick three, because I can't see I don't see us going forward with everything all at once. But I think we could make reasonable arguments on several of these going forward fairly rapidly, especially those that like the UUT or the TOT that does not affect our residents. It affects people coming into the city, and that Palm Springs model, I think, is a great way of gathering some of that information and addressing the quality of life and the peaceful enjoyment of people's homes if they are bad actors. So that's probably all I have to offer. And at this point, if you're okay with that, I will leave the meeting.
Are you were you just asking me and Chris if we're okay with you leaving?
Yes, I am. I'm asking for permission.
We have 2 thumbs up with John leaving. Thank you for your feedback, John.
Thank you all. Take care.
All right, Mr. Rogers. Comment.
Yeah, I don't need to take up too much time. I agree with almost everything that John said there. One of the things that I do think that we need to figure out how to articulate as we move forward is that part of why we're doing this isn't to raise, the revenue for the city, but actually to be able to shift our tax base to a more stable source of funding. And that the intention is for us to do this and allow some of the sales tax to expire, which I know that people have been looking for us to be able to do. And I know, I hear you, even doing all of these things, we're unlikely to still meet the amount that we would lose if we allow one of those sales taxes to expire. But I do think that it's a very good aspirational goal for us to do both that, as well as figure out how to restructure the organization in a way that allows us to let the emergency sales taxes go by the wayside. With that, I already gave a number of comments, so I'll stop there. And I'm looking forward to more on this discussion. Thanks, Alan.
Hi, Alan. I'll also be echoing what you've already heard. For me, I'm still really wary with the business license tax. But again, if we look at it, okay, over a 5-year period, whatever, and I'm just pulling 5 years out. But I'd be interested in talking with the stakeholders with this on all these areas. Same thing with the cannabis industry. I appreciate the comments that John and Chris had with that, but I would like to talk to the stakeholders. I know we have a cannabis subcommittee, give that feedback. How's it going? And rather than using anecdotal information, let's use some real information. And I know, as we've already heard, that is going to put a bigger demand on staff, but I think that's where we're at. And the same thing with short-term rentals. I'm pleased to hear that we're going to try to get additional data. What I would be looking for, I know Mr. Rogers talked about there's a legislative way, maybe getting assistance from Sacramento. I'm not sure if we can wait that long, but if that is a quicker route of getting the information versus us having to go with a consultant firm, it's disappointing, but I think it may be what we need to do now to get that information that will help us prioritize the decisions. Same thing with the parcel tax. I really like that idea. If there is a way where we can do second homes or short-term rentals, that would be, I think, very interesting, and we could have a more robust discussion in front of the entire council. And for me, one of the biggest priorities is modernizing the UUT. So if we're talking about the priorities about what you shared today, for me, UUT, I think, gives us the greatest opportunity to modernize things. So with that, Ellen, do you have any other questions or information you would like from either of us?
No, sir. I think I have plenty to work on.
Not going to be sitting around wondering what to do. Okay, I appreciate that. Mr. Rogers, do you have anything on the for our next meeting agenda items that rise to the surface?
No, I think a lot of the work that we're doing is important. I know that the Economic Development Committee is, tangentially crossing some of our jurisdictional boundaries. I'll just be looking for more information as we learn more about what the impacts are from COVID-19. And that doesn't necessarily need to be in long-term finance. I know we're also reporting out at council meetings.
I would say on the 12th, our next meeting, we are talking about the public input from PG&E. So that will, I think that's going to be probably the only item on that agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that conversation, because I know each of us have been receiving feedback. Our council has, but not the in total information. So we'll just, regarding that, I know the survey ended on the 25th, so we will be getting data as.
Yeah, right. So I've seen the raw data, and it's raw. So what we're doing is we are trying to put that into a more accessible format that kind of gives you a good view of how folks responded. That's easier to read than what we're looking at.
Okay. And one additional thing, just to clarify too, I meant to say this on the TOT. Again, 3% and 2%. I would be interested. What are the consequences of impacting those numbers one way or the other?
Right.
I heard one member of the public speaking about they'll give the detailed plan. It'd be the same thing for me on the 3% that the city is using. Where is it going towards, and what would be the consequences of either increasing it or decreasing it?
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. McGlynn? Did you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Thank you for your participation. Meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. See y'all.